Okay, then let's get started. Welcome to our review meeting. Today we look at the 1.116 release, and we have 5 topics. We start with Stoyan with the new ShootState Finalizer controller. Then we have an update about etcd-druid CEL validations in the CRDs and the dedicated API module presented by Madhav and Shreyas. Then I will shortly present a small PR that fixed 2 bugs in the NetworkPolicy controller. Tim will demonstrate the new feature for configuring extensions for the seed reconciliation. And then finally, Johannes will give an update about GAP 28, which is about the autonomous shoots. With that, please get started with the first topic.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, hope you can see it. Yeah, so as of release 116, we're introducing a new controller that mainly deals with the finalizer. So not mainly, but yeah, deals with a finalizer that is being added during a control plane migration. So I might start with the reasoning behind it, detailed in the issue you're seeing. So it turns out that in some edge scenarios where the shoot state controller, the actual shoot state controller that manages the resource is not enabled, the shoot state resource could get deleted before or like prior to, so it gets deleted prior to the last operation of the shoot gets updated. And if an error occurs between those 2 steps, we might end up in a situation where, sorry, does anyone want to say something? Okay. We might end up in a situation where the retrial of the restore operation could fail because of the missing shoot state resource. So here's a detailed explanation of it. And okay, so I'll continue with some details around the controller itself. Let's first see the predicates that we have, because we want to mitigate some unnecessary reconciliations of the controller. We are introducing few checks to actually validate if the shoot is indeed in a migration process. So we're basically checking if the last operation gets updated to its type gets updated to a migrate from any other type. We check if it's updating from migrate to restore, which is another indication that a migration process is in place. We have the third check, which actually validates if the restore operation gets updated to succeeded, which is another indication. And the last one is about the restore operation being updated to reconcile. So those are a few pre-checks that we do. And the reconciler itself is, yeah, it kind of matches the predicate that we earlier saw. It basically adds a finalizer when the shoot is in a migrate state or is in a restore that hasn't succeeded yet, and the finalizer is not yet added. So that's the addition, and it gets removed when the restore operation succeeded or is in a reconcile and it hasn't been set. It hasn't been set, but it has a finalizer. Yeah. Okay, so those are the some brief overview of the controller. We can continue with a quick demo that I've prepared. So here we are basically having 2 seeds and a shoot, and I'm going to trigger a migration of that shoot to the walkout 2 seed. So here we are just watching for the shoot state and if the finalizer gets added. And later we will see in the logs how it gets deleted, because it happens yeah, quite fast here, and yeah, we kind of might miss it. And probably we can just watch the shoots updates. Okay, since that process takes some time, maybe we can, if you have any questions around it, around the implementation or the reasoning behind it, we can discuss it now, since it will take about 2 to 4 minutes. Okay, I can get back to the code. Something interesting, we are reacting on the shoot events as well, just to be sure that we are in a migration process. So we won't react on every update, but only the relevant ones. Okay, as you can see here, we have the finalizer added. So yeah, it definitely take its time.
Stoyan, can you post the migrate script?
Can I pause it? Like,
Post it to the chat.
oh, okay, sure.
Thanks.
Okay, maybe I will need to adjust it a bit, because I'll yeah, copy those numbers to the left. So I'll format it and paste it afterwards. Thank you. It's actually taken from the documentation, so I'll provide the actual link for you to check, because there are additional details there around the migration process itself and how it's triggered. I hope I won't get overtime, but yeah. Maybe in the meantime, we can check what the script does. So in essence, you might be familiar, but triggering the migration happens by updating the spec seed name field. So when there is a if there is a difference between the spec seed name and status seed name, it indicates that the target seed has changed and the migration is triggered. So that's some detail about the migration process. Yeah, it's getting closer.
We're basically waiting for the restore to finish to see the finalizer disappear again, right?
Yep. So the last thing that we should see is the ShootState getting deleted, and we can check the logs that the finalizer was indeed removed from the resource. That's the only thing that we are waiting for. Yeah, sorry for that.
Yeah, maybe we can skip this part in the interest of time and the other presentations, but yeah, I guess the gist of it has been understood.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So thank you all for the time, and that was all from me.
Yeah, thanks. Is there any other questions? We can, of course, answer them now. If not, then we can continue with the second topic, which is etcd-druid.
Okay, so we
this is visible.
yes, so we released etcd-druid v0.2810, and with this release, we've gotten a lot of changes. Most of the changes are developer-centric changes and restructuring changes, which helps us build a lot of features that are in progress at this point of time. But there are certain noteworthy changes which we also did. So etcd-druid is now a multi-module Git repository, which means we have different Go modules for API and a generated client, which was previously missing. And so the new Go module has, the idea was to have the API dependencies to be absolutely having minimal set of dependencies. And today there was a cyclic dependency between Gartner repository and etcd-druid. Both of them had dependency on each other. So there was a cyclic dependency. This caused problems with respect to when we make changes and how we do local deployments when we have race PRs on Gartner and etcd-druid at the same time. So we removed that cyclic dependency completely, and now Gartner only depends upon the etcd-druid API Go module, which has extremely three dependencies. Mostly it's API machinery, API, and utils, KTS utils. That's about it. Then can you go to the next slide? So we also have introduced a CRT API, which means the single source of truth for all the CRTs are going to be maintained inside the etcd-druid repository. And if you want to programmatically access it or access it via Helm chart, you can do that. And we provide Go APIs for actually accessing the CRT YAML files. Today, we also, in the next slide, we will also demonstrate how we also moved, or rather we introduced CEL validations. Right now, we didn't validate any of our CRs. It was only done as a GRM webhook, extensions webhook. And the only field that was validated was only one field, which is a store prefix field, which was not enough from our perspective. And therefore, we had to introduce something new. There was a very long pending ticket raised by Tim Usner, probably 2 years back or 3 years back, that ticket was raised. But we have been cleaning our issue list more and more now. And so we looked into that, and we decided that we'll also actually create the API module, and then we will also provide access to this. We implement the validations using CEL expressions. And the reason, since we introduced a lot of CEL expressions, we found out that some of the libraries that are used by CEL in Kubernetes is actually depending upon a minimum version of 1.29. And that's the reason why in the, can you go back to the API? Yeah, so that's why we maintain currently two CRD YAMLs, one which is for Kubernetes version less than 1.29, and one which doesn't have any embedded set expressions, and one which is greater than equal to 1.29, which is having the embedded set expressions. And these are all essentially baked into the CRD using or the essentially Kubernetes, sorry, kubebuild tags, annotations. And so the Go API provides you a way in which you can pass the latest version and get the relevant CRD that is applicable to you. So for clusters which are less than 1.29, we will preserve the, I mean, in any case, irrespective of the latest version, we are right now preserving the GRM webhook, which means it will also be called today. But it does hardly anything. So, and therefore we didn't want to make it optional based on enable or disable based on the latest version, because when the minimum supported version is 1.28, 1.29, then we will anyway remove the GRM extensions webhook, and the CEL validations will be the default set of validations that will happen. So another thing that we introduced was a client module. We have talked about. So it'll provide you typed APIs for accessing and doing cloud operations on etcd and etcd copy backups task resources that are currently the only resources that are exposed out of etcd-druid. More will come in the next few releases, and they will also be added as part of the client module. Can you go to the next slide? So as I mentioned before, so we use kubebuilder validation partner and kubebuilder validation X validation, and the rest I have already mentioned. So you can go through this link, and this is something that we have purposely done. And why we have done it is because, I mean, you can probably go to the next one. So since we didn't have anything, so it was easy for us to make this decision. We didn't want the remote call to be done because most of the validations are actually simple in nature. And they are, even if they are composite validations, then they are all accessing different fields within the same CRD, so we could achieve all of them using CEL expressions. The only problem that we wanted to solve was that these CEL expressions, since they are baked into the CRDs, we needed a way in which we can always validate them, because as and when new validations are introduced, we want to also ensure that they are correct validations, and we come to know about it during development itself. So we introduce integration test as well, which will run all these validations for all types of CRDs. And we ensure that these validations, whatever are introduced, we have sufficient integration tests for them so that they are all caught during the development process itself, if there are any issues with it. And you all know why what's the benefits of what are the benefits of CEL validations over validating webhooks. So I really don't need to tell it in this forum. Maybe you can go to the next one. Now,
so the new validations we included as part of the 0.28 release can be categorized in two ways: regex-based ones and CEL-based ones. So the regex ones mainly validate the duration fields and also the cron schedules. These don't natively use CEL expressions because we wanted to avoid another layer of translation. So for CEL expressions, the rules the validation rules are for immutable fields. So right now we've made spec.storage class and spec.volume claim template as the immutable fields. Initially, we also planned to have storage capacity, etcd.spec.storage capacity as an immutable field, but we removed that. I've put a link for the issue. You can look that up later. And the other validation we provide is to make sure that the garbage collection period is always greater than the delta snapshot period.
Just
these are the validations.
Just one line on the storage capacity. So today, all the Gartner end-to-end tests are slightly misconfigured. And we learned that while we actually made this immutable in the first iteration of the PR, and then we had to later remove it. And the reason is that it's a requirement from etcd backup restore to configure your volume size to be 3 times the etcd DB size. So while in the end-to-end test, the etcd DB size is kept as 8 GI, the volume size is actually kept very low. and it's 10 GI, which is not 3 times 8 GI. And why we require three times that etcd-db size, because we use the volumes for restoration phase and etcd-db, and also for taking the full snapshot, we also preserve it. So when we computed it to be on the safe side, we take maximum of 8 GB. That's currently what is supported. And so we take 3 times that, which is 24, which means at least you should have 24 GI. But because if you don't have this, then you have a potential of running into issues. End-to-end tests don't run into these issues because HCDs are not really bombarded with a lot of data. So the DB size doesn't go beyond a certain very minimal size. So it doesn't really go beyond 3 GB or 4 GB. And we don't really run into cases where we don't have to do restorations or take full snapshots, etc. So that's why end-to-end tests do not complain, and we don't have these issues. But this is we want to make it a strict requirement for productive production use cases. So we can discuss how we enable this in future. Go ahead.
Yeah, before that, maybe we can just show a demo of how these expressions are done. So I have a minimum kind cluster here and I have the CRDs deployed. So let's just take a look at the immutable field for now. I'll just apply this. Okay. So right now, the immutable fields, as mentioned before, are storage class and volume claim template. So if I try changing the value of storage class to anything new, yeah, as you can see, it rejects that because it's an immutable field. And if I try unsetting the value, that also gets rejected. Same thing for volume claim template. Right now, it's initially unset. And if I try setting it, since it's an immutable field, it just outright rejects that. Now you can take a look at the duration fields. So I'll just apply that. Yeah. So it threw out 2 errors. One saying the duration is invalid over here. So it's not given in the right order over here. And the other one was the rule mentioned where garbage collection period is supposed to be greater than the delta snapshot period. So here it's slightly less than. So if we fix that and say give a valid duration over here, those errors just vanish. Okay. Now to check for cron expressions, we've done the regex checks for the same. So there are 2 invalid cron expressions over here. One has the minute part of it going beyond 60, which is not allowed, and the other has a missing field. So if I try to set this etcd, yeah, so it gives out the regex saying this one's invalid, and the fix for that, if we fix that, it'll pass all the cases. And this is not a check that we introduced recently. It has always been a part of etcd. It's the check for enum fields mainly, and we still continue to offer that. So the etcd metrics field as a part of the spec takes in 2 values. It's either basic or extensive. And for the test here, I provided an invalid value over here. So if I try applying that, yeah, so it gives out the error saying it's a part of either basic or extensive. And similarly for this one, it's supposed to be either periodic or revision, and I've given a wrong one here. Yeah. So that's it for the demo. Maybe Madhur can go over the note.
There are other changes that we thought if we have time, we'll probably quickly mention them, and maybe we have a little bit of time. So one breaking change that has come in is we have removed the scale sub resource has been removed from the etcd resource until etcd-druid can natively support handling VPA recommendations. And there's a limitation in VPA where if a parent resource, so here etcd resource has a child resource, which is a stateful set. And stateful set also has a scale sub resource. So there in this combination, VPA doesn't allow this to happen. So for Gardener use cases, what used to happen before was there was an explicit step in the scripts, hack scripts, to actually regenerate the CRD and then explicitly remove the sales cover resource. So since now we propose to do it directly via the API, so we will remove the scale sub resource, and at a later point of time, when we are actually do it as directly consuming these VPA recommendations to actually control how the VPA recommendations are applied, then that is when we are going to bring it back. And we now produce actually Helm charts, which are now pushed as an OCR artifact. For tests, or for our local deployments, all the PK resources are now generated. Nothing is checked in. No PK artifact is actually checked in into the Git repository. Dependency of Gartner has completely been removed from the mono repo, and that reduces the etcd-druid binary size by 18 MB. And use etcd wrapper was a feature flag that we enabled some time back, and now it's GA, so it's also been removed because it's now being enabled by default. So these are other some noteworthy developer enhancements that we have brought in this release. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the detailed explanation of the new changes. One question that popped into my mind is regarding the CEL expression. They are now, like, these are evaluated in the API server, right? So
Yes.
did you see if this would put any significant or even measurable load on the API server when creating etcd resources, or do you think this is
no, we have not observed any significant load, and one of the reasons also can be that in Garden clusters you don't have so many updates or creations happening for these etcd resources, so the frequency is not high.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Also, the complexity of the CEL expressions depends on how we've written the expressions as well. And right now we have very simple validations in etcd-druid, so that doesn't provide, that doesn't load up the API server.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation and the overview. If there don't seem to be any more questions, I will take over with the next topic. Okay, so I would like to quickly present this PR, which basically fixes two issues in the network policy controller of the Gardener Resource Manager. The first one I will just briefly mention, I will not demo it. So the first one is about this here, that there are some situations where the network policy controller tries to create network policies in namespaces that are about to be deleted. And I think here it's better visible. So this basically results in error logs like this, which are just a bit annoying and also confusing for operators if they read that. So there was already another PR 3 weeks ago or so, which has also tackled such a problem, but this didn't fix all the cases. But now this issue should be resolved. I said this is just a short heads up. I would actually like to spend more time talking about the second change, which is about an issue when the pod label selector key can become too long, and I will demo it in the system. So first of all, as a short recap, what this controller is doing is that it basically reconciles services of any kind and creates network policies for egress traffic and ingress traffic for these services. So for example, let's say we have this one here, VPA recommender, which has this one port. And if we then check the network policies for this VPA recommender, make it a bit smaller. So here you basically see there's this egress policy, which basically allows egress traffic to the VPA recommender for all pods that are labeled with this label. So there's this networking resource of Gardener Cloud prefix, and then you can basically say to the service name, the protocol, and the port. And with this, you explicitly can allow a dedicated pod to communicate to the VPA recommender. And similarly, there is then this ingress policy that is needed to also allow the ingress traffic on the VPA recommender side. The other two, I mean, there are many more configuration options we skip for now, but this is basically the general concept. And what I will now do is I have prepared a service here that has a pretty long name. There are also other options how you can basically end up in the situation where this label selector that I just showed, so the one that is prefixed with the networking resource Gardener Cloud key, can become too long. I will do it like this. I will apply it. And in the meantime, I will also start to update Gardener to the latest version. So currently an old version is deployed so that I can show you what happens. If we check the network policy and now grep for the service name, we don't see anything, which is not what we would expect. And then we can try to read the logs, the Gardener Resource Manager, and grep for the service name. And you can see there are a lot of errors. That are basically saying that the pod selector that we try to configure, which is again this networking prefix, then 2, and then the service name, which is here pretty long, plus the port protocol and number, this may not exceed 63 characters. And this is just some restriction that comes from Kubernetes API that we have to adhere to. So the previous state here, and this basically means that simply no network policies are created, meaning that you would not be able to communicate to this service unless you do some custom network policy management or whatever. We have some real world examples where this happens. For example, for extensions that have pretty long names. One example is this Gardener extension Shoot Network Problem Detector, or how it's called. It is a pretty long name. And this together with the namespace name, it can become too long also. There are also some other extensions that have pretty long names. Obviously, this was not a problem so far, because obviously there is no bot that needs to actively communicate with them via this approach. So that's also why we only have noticed it now or quite late. But generally, this is of course a bad situation because the controller is now simply crash looping forever, silently failing here. And this can also end up in a lot of CPU consumption if you have a significantly large cluster with a lot of extensions that might not pass this check here. Okay, in the meantime, let's see. I hope it was updated already to the new version, which has the fix. Let's check again. Maybe something got created. Yes. Okay, so now with the fixed version that I just deployed, that contains this pull request, you see that the network policies were created, and in the key we are now doing the following. If it's becoming too long, we are simply cutting it after 56 characters, I think, and then we append this hash suffix here in the key. So now you basically lose some information as human reader because you don't see the port protocol, the port protocol anymore, and the port number. So TCP 3000 would typically be at the end here, but this is now not there anymore. But at least you now have a stable key that you can use in other pods in order to communicate with this service. Another option would be, of course, to try to simply make the names shorter. So this is also always an option, but if you don't want to do that, now at least the controller doesn't fail anymore forever. And to make this a bit transparent, it also reports some events on the service. So you can see there's an event about pod label selector keys too long from the network policy controller, which explains that it had to mutate the regular pod label selector because it exceeded this length limit. So this would have been the regular selector, which is too long, and it was now changed to this one that we also already just saw. Okay, so far to the change, I guess you will probably not notice it in 99% of the cases. Otherwise, we would have talked about this much earlier, but yeah, maybe you will have such a case where you need that and then you are aware of where this happens. Okay, any questions to that? Nope. Then I would like to hand over to Tim for the next topic, which are the seed extensions.
Thanks, Raphael. Okay. Minimize that one. Okay. So I'd like to say a few words about a new feature for seed extensions. It's basically this pull request. But before I do so, I'd like to spend a few moments giving a little refresher about our extensions and the state we already have. So as you know, we have the possibility to extend the Gardener functionality with some arbitrary extensions. And we support that basically for two scenarios, at least before that change. So the first scenario is a extension for the garden cluster. So in this case, we have the garden runtime cluster and the garden resource, and the garden resource specifies in its specification some extension. Here it's type foo. This means that the garden resource or the operator notices it requires a certain extension controller that is registered. So this is the first step. The extension controller is required and deployed to the garden runtime cluster. And during the garden reconciliation, this extension resource on the left side is created in the garden namespace. And this one is of class garden. And then once it is created or updated or deleted, the extension controller here gets the event and does the necessary things to deploy something which the extension might have, or modify something. Can be anything, right? So it's very generic. But this is like the example we have for the garden cluster. So this is the first scenario. And the second scenario, which has been in place for a very long time, is that you have shoot extensions. It's more or less the same principle, but this time you have a shoot resource that defines an extension. Again, can be type foo. Then it means that there's an extension controller required on the seed cluster. So it's deployed there. The gardenlet creates the extension resource in the shoot control plane namespace, this time of class shoot, or the class is even empty for legacy reasons. And then the extension controller in the seed can go ahead and does whatever is necessary to deploy the extension. So one example for this would be to have a certificate extension and a certificate service for shoot clusters. Okay, what is missing now, and what was added in the latest release is the third use case or the third scenario, and this is like an extension for seed clusters. So again, we are here in the seed cluster as the previous example, the previous scenario, but this time we define the extension in the seed manifest or in the seed resource. And then again, we have a very similar setup. It means it requires the extension controller. The gardenlet creates an extension resource in the seed reconcile flow, but this time in the garden namespace on the seed cluster. And then the extension controller also goes ahead and does the necessary stuff. So very, the approach is very similar in each of these scenarios, but now we have like closed the last gap to support every scenario there is you might want to deploy an extension to. Okay, so what is required for you as an extension?
developer to support this third scenario. It's actually pretty easy. You only need to define or let the controller define that it's ready to reconcile extensions of class seed. So we have this, this extension controller, which you can reuse from the Gardener repository and also only implement the actuator. And this already has an extension classes slice. That means you can give the extension more classes, like for instance, the affected controller is able to reconcile food and seed extensions at the same time. Then you would also configure this here. Or you create a separate controller and say this one is only for the seed class, the other one is only for the shoot class, and there's another one even for the garden class. So it is really, really dependent on what the extension does at the end of the day. But you have all the scenarios that are possible to support this now. Okay, so this was the theory. And let me give you an example. So I'm in the local setup. I have my extension controller. Let me open the logs maybe. And what do we have? We have a controller registration for the provider local. So, and it registers for certain resources. The one that is important for our use case is the kind extension. And here we have a special type called local extension seeds. And I prepared the provider or the provider local is prepared to so that these types respect the seed and shoot class. So what it means is I can go to the seed. Let me quickly copy that type. Okay. So there's one seed. Now I can go ahead, extensions, type, and yeah, tell the seed that it needs to or that it wants to use this extension. Save it. Then we should have a new extension resource in the garden namespace. It was already reconciled by the controller and patched to succeeded. So it was really quick because the controller or the provider local doesn't really do much in the background. It's just for testing purpose. And of course, I can also go ahead and delete this one again. It's processing for a little while and then it's eventually gone. Okay, so this is like the demo and the main principle. Let me say a few more words about what is missing at the moment. So what you can do at the moment is that you define a controller registration, or you can globally enable this, this extension for all seed clusters. So we have this globally enabled flag for mainly for shoot clusters at the moment, which means you can enable extensions for every shoot cluster there is without them defining the extension in the shoot resource. And we want to have a similar behavior for the seeds as well. So this is missing at the moment, and will follow in a few days, I guess, or in one of the next releases. And the second part, which is missing, is a slight improvement for operators, so that you can in the registration tell a certain extension is able to reconcile certain classes. So that means at the moment, if I would type or if I configure this class in the seed, there won't be any error message or any validation telling, hey, this extension is, or there's no extension being able to reconcile this type for seed clusters. So it would only error in the seed reconciliation because there's no controller taking care about the extension resource. So this is something we also want to add in the next in one of the next releases, so that you have some more validation and user-friendly or operator-friendly setup then. Okay, that's it from my side. Please feel free to
So Tim,
shoot
will
out your questions.
will it influence the seed readiness as well? These
Yeah, it will.
extensions.
Yes. So the GardenNet reconciles the seed. It creates the extension resource and waits for the extension resource to get ready. This is how it influences it.
And can there be a case where these extensions really don't need to be ready for a shoot to be ready? Or for a shoot reconciliation to see, currently the shoot reconciliation is blocked if the seed is not ready. Do you see that these extensions may, I don't know in my head, I'm theoretically talking right now, but can that happen, that these extensions really not influence the shoot reconciliation because they become, their readiness is now blocking the shoot reconciliation?
That's hard to tell actually, because the extensions themselves are so generic that you don't know that beforehand, right? So maybe there are some exceptions, but I think in general, if you want to provide something to the seed, then it's often a prerequisite for shoots as well.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Let's see how it behaves. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I had a small question regarding managed seeds. So I would assume if I use managed seeds, I would just specify the extension in the underlying shoot manifest and don't actually need this feature. Or would the idea be that I deploy my shoot without extension and then configure the seed extension?
Oh, that again depends on the extension. So for instance, we have this idea or the case for certificates again. So there is this wildcard certificate that you can create for once in the seed cluster, and that is then reused for the shoot control planes, right? For example, to serve the observability endpoints. And the idea would be that the certificate extension there is from Gardener takes this takes the request once for the seed and requests the certificate centrally for the seed cluster. So you divide the responsibilities for the scenarios actually. So what I was meant to say is that there are some extensions you might want to only enable for unmanaged seeds, because for the managed seeds you already got them covered by the shoot services. That's for sure. But maybe your extension brings a very special service only or for the central seed cluster, right? Like the certificate stuff.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we have some use cases where we deploy some additional monitoring or observability components per seed, and this would be a perfect use case for this feature, which previously didn't feel so natural, right?
Yeah.
So I really like the improvements you presented. It makes a consistent and intuitive story in this extensions area. So great job. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And also maybe good that you mentioned it. So now with closing this last gap, I would say extension can fully deliver all the aspects it might need to deliver, right? So at the moment you still have to go the split brain way. That means you have to have some additional deployment mechanism to, for example, in your case, deploy the monitoring stuff on top. And that's a problem you had to solve yourself on top of another extension there might already is. And now you have the entire package built in.
Okay, I guess we should continue with the last topic. Thanks for the questions and the presentation. Johannes, I hope you can make it in almost 8.5 minutes.
Yep. Let's see. So what I'm going to present is basically the current state of autonomous shoot clusters. You know, there was a gap, and we have a nice issue with a lot of topics where we already completed several of them. We did especially several pre-work, and now I can actually show also something because with the last release we have two major improvements that lead to actually visible demo. So we bring up control plane pods as static pods, and also we bring up kubelets so that we have a node with Garden ADM in it and make it idempotent, which is especially interesting in development scenarios, meaning that we can now iterate faster, because if something breaks, we can just restart it and don't always have to throw away everything and start from scratch. So without further ado, here looking at the remote local setup, I've already done make kind up and make Garden ADM high touch up. So I have already connected to my pseudo virtual machine or bare metal host, my machine in my kind cluster. And there, first of all, we can take a look what we have, because we provided some resources in manifest, which we then use basically for our local setup. From bottom to the top, basically looking at it, we see a shoot specification that somehow resembles what you might expect in the local setup. What is important here to know, we had for our worker section this special case control plane, which marks basically the worker group of our control plane nodes. Currently, we don't have any ordinary worker nodes, just control plane nodes. And apart from that, several settings, some of which are currently necessary exactly because we need to configure swapping properly, which might also change over time. In addition to a shoot specification, there are a couple of other things that are necessary for now. For example, we have a project, we have a controller registration, we have a controller deployment, and also a cloud profile. So nothing too special. Now let's see at the actual demo. We want to do Garden ADM init. So we want to set up our control plane and do that using our resources. So what happens now is, first of all, we create a lot of secrets. If you are fast and look at all the secret names, you might also see that we actually currently create a little bit too many secrets that we don't use or might actually get rid of later on. But that's basically because we reuse almost all code that we've already used for ordinary shoot creation. So let's go over it more slowly. So we create a lot of secrets. We basically initialize kubelet or create a fake bootstrap token for kubelet, because then we start our control plane as static pods, meaning we have to bring up kubelet, but kubelet cannot yet talk to an API server. So we have to somehow fake that a little bit. But with a fake token, that's actually possible. And then afterwards, we generate even more secrets, but we also generate basically the manifests for our files, for our static pods, meaning we take the deployments and generate out of that static pod manifest, and also the corresponding files, meaning we put the secrets in the correct places and so on, and adapt the file paths. So, and once we have that done, that's around here. We basically use functionality from Gardener Node Agent to write all these files to the local dist, and also enable the corresponding systemd units. So, for example, here we see we enable all the units like kubelet, containerd, and Gardener Node Agent. Then once that is up, once kubelet really starts, we kubelet start the static pods. We wait for the kube API server to start, And then we actually provide kubelet with a real token, because then it can actually talk to Kube API server. Kubelet will try to register the node and will also try to create a serving certificate signing request for its serving certificate, and that is being approved by us. So what we can see here, we can also do a little bit. So get a general admin kube config and adjust the permissions, and then simply get the node. So we see we have now a node. It's currently not ready because we have no CNI in place. So we describe the nodes. We see basically container runtime network not ready because we have not yet deployed the CNI. But apart from that, we see that there is a node. We can also get all the pods. So we see we already split etcd into an events etcd and a main etcd, and then we have the default control plane pods, API server, controller manager, scheduler, and like I said, kubelet creates a certificate signing request, and those are approved by us. And that's basically what we've done. We can also show shortly the idempotency bit. So I can just start it over again, and it's fairly fast now because it sees that everything is in place. We don't have to generate the secrets again. And now we can simply add more functionality. We're in the process of adding all the other stuff, all the other components that we usually deploy, and iterate also in the development faster. So, and yeah, in the interest of time, I don't show, I mean, you can obviously then port forward, go from externally from your local host also into the node. You might need to change then the ports. Currently, everything is running on 443, which might change it going forward, but yeah, that's about it. Probably already in time. And if anybody has any comments, questions, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I hand over to you, Raphael, for the closing words.
This looks great. It's awesome.
Thanks. Okay. As there are no other questions or feedback, then we can now close the meeting. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks to the presenters for making it in time. And we'll meet again in 2 weeks for the next Gardener release. Have a nice time. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.